I'm Dr. Sarah Mitchell, 36 years old, and until 3 months ago, I was the heart and soul of Mitchell Family Medical Practice, the clinic I had spent 8 years building from a small neighborhood practice into one of the most respected family medicine centers in our county. While my older sister Rebecca was always the golden child who could do no wrong, I was the one working 18-hour days, treating patients, managing staff, and growing our practice. When my parents decided to retire, they handed control of the clinic to her despite her having no medical degree and zero healthcare experience. 2 weeks after taking over, she called me into her office and coldly terminated my employment with no explanation. "Your services are no longer required," she said with a smirk. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on my sister, who thought she could discard me like a used prescription pad, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted. Growing up in the Mitchell household meant understanding from an early age that there was a clear hierarchy among the children. My parents, Dr. Robert Mitchell and Margaret Mitchell, had built their family practice from nothing in a small Vermont town. Dad had graduated from medical school with crushing debt and a dream, while Mom, a former nurse, handled the administrative side from a converted bedroom in our house. Through decades of sacrifice and dedication, they transformed Mitchell Family Practice into a cornerstone of our community's healthcare. Our family consisted of 4 people: my parents, my older sister Rebecca, who is 3 years my senior, and me. From my earliest memories, it was obvious that Rebecca was the favored child. She was beautiful, charismatic, and seemed to excel effortlessly at everything she attempted. When Rebecca brought home perfect report cards, my parents would celebrate with elaborate family dinners and gifts. When I achieved the same academic success the following year, I received a brief "good job" before conversation moved to Rebecca's latest achievement. In 5th grade, Rebecca won the regional debate championship, and my parents had the trophy professionally mounted in our living room where it remained for years. When I was accepted into the National Honor Society in 8th grade, my certificate was pinned to the refrigerator for a few days before disappearing entirely. These patterns continued throughout our childhood, subtle but persistent reminders that Rebecca's accomplishments simply carried more weight than mine. While Rebecca focused on student government, drama club, and social activities, I developed a genuine fascination with medicine. By age 14, I was volunteering at our local hospital, shadowing nurses and doctors whenever possible. My father seemed surprised by my interest, but allowed me to observe at his practice during summer breaks. "Just don't get in the way," he would say, not realizing how carefully I was absorbing everything about patient care, medical procedures, and practice management. During high school, Rebecca applied to prestigious liberal arts colleges with my parents' enthusiastic support and financial backing. Meanwhile, I researched pre-med programs and scholarship opportunities, often working part-time jobs to cover application fees since my parents were too focused on Rebecca's college preparations to notice my academic pursuits. When Rebecca was accepted to Williams College, our house became a celebration central with parties, congratulatory calls, and endless preparations for her departure. When I received a full academic scholarship to the University of Vermont's Honors Pre-Med program, my mother said, "That's wonderful, dear," before returning to shopping for Rebecca's dorm room essentials. The disparity in their reactions was so stark that even our neighbors commented on it, though never directly to my parents. College years widened the gap significantly. While Rebecca enjoyed the full university experience with generous financial support from our parents, I maintained a grueling schedule of advanced science courses, research projects, and part-time work to cover my living expenses. During breaks, I continued working at my father's practice, learning about patient records, insurance processing, and the business side of healthcare. My parents rarely acknowledged these efforts, treating them as merely expected rather than impressive. Meanwhile, Rebecca's internships at art galleries and marketing firms, arranged through my parents' social connections, were celebrated as brilliant career moves that would lead to amazing opportunities. Despite the lack of recognition, I never lost my passion for medicine. There was something deeply fulfilling about helping people during their most vulnerable moments, solving diagnostic puzzles, and being trusted with someone's health and well-being. This genuine calling sustained me through years of medical school, residency, and fellowship training, even when my achievements were consistently overshadowed by Rebecca's latest career change or social success. Throughout medical school at Dartmouth, I graduated summa cum laude and was inducted into the Alpha Omega Alpha Honor Society. My parents attended graduation but spent most of the ceremony discussing Rebecca's new job at a Boston marketing agency. During my residency in family medicine, I published research papers and received recognition for patient care excellence, but these accomplishments were rarely mentioned during family gatherings. When I completed my residency and fellowship, several prestigious medical groups offered me positions with excellent salaries and benefits. For a moment, I seriously considered accepting one of them, starting fresh where I wouldn't constantly live in Rebecca's shadow and where my medical expertise would be valued on its own merit. But ultimately, I decided to join my father's practice. Despite everything, Mitchell family practice was in my blood. I believed I could help modernize and expand the clinic while finally earning the recognition I had worked toward my entire life. That decision would prove to be both the best and worst choice of my professional career. My first day as a full-time physician at Mitchell Family Practice began without any fanfare. Mom handed me an outdated employee handbook and Dad pointed me toward the smallest office in the back of the clinic. "Start with the overflow patients," he said, handing me a stack of charts for people other doctors had been too busy to see properly. Nothing too complicated. That stack of neglected patients became symbolic of my early years at the practice. I took on the difficult cases, the time-intensive chronic disease management, and the patients other providers found challenging, all without recognition or additional compensation. Within 6 months, I had implemented an electronic health records system that streamlined documentation and improved patient care coordination, saving countless hours of administrative work. My father's only comment was, "Good. Now maybe we can focus on actual medicine instead of paperwork." I didn't let his dismissive attitude discourage me. I developed a comprehensive patient wellness program and presented it at a staff meeting. Several nurses and medical assistants responded enthusiastically, but my father interrupted midway through my presentation. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves with fancy programs. We've been taking care of patients just fine for 30 years. Rather than arguing, I implemented the wellness program gradually, patient by patient, without making a big announcement about it. I took on increasingly complex responsibilities, moving from general family medicine to specialized care in areas like diabetes management and women's health. I worked 12-hour days, arriving before the cleaning crew and leaving after the last patient had been seen. During this time, I formed crucial relationships with people who would later become essential allies during my darkest moment. Lisa Rodriguez was our head nurse, a sharp and compassionate woman who had been with the practice for 15 years. Initially skeptical of the young doctor who was also the boss's daughter, she grew to respect my clinical skills and dedication to patient care. "You actually listen to patients," she told me after I spent an extra hour with an elderly woman whose symptoms had been dismissed by other providers. "Half the doctors I've worked with are too busy thinking about their next appointment to really hear what patients are saying." Jennifer Walsh joined as our nurse practitioner during my 3rd year. Brilliant and detail-oriented, she appreciated my evidence-based approach to medicine and frequently collaborated with me on complex cases. Together, we developed protocols that improved patient outcomes while reducing unnecessary procedures and costs. Marcus Thompson, our practice administrator, who we hired to modernize our business operations, became another trusted colleague. His innovative management approaches complemented my clinical vision, and together we transformed many of the practice's outdated administrative systems. As my clinical reputation grew, so did the practice's success. I introduced telemedicine capabilities that expanded our reach to rural patients. I developed partnerships with specialists that improved continuity of care and reduced patient costs. I created a quality improvement program that earned us recognition from state medical associations. The most significant breakthrough came during my 5th year when I successfully negotiated a contract with Granite Health Insurance, the largest insurer in our region, to become a preferred provider for their preventive care initiatives. After months of meetings, presentations, and negotiations that addressed their specific quality metrics, they selected our practice as a pilot site for their innovative care model. This partnership brought substantial additional revenue and positioned us as leaders in value-based healthcare. The program's success led to similar contracts with two other major insurers, fundamentally changing our practice's financial stability and professional reputation throughout the medical community. Through all these achievements, my parents remained lukewarm in their praise. "Not bad," my father said after the Granite Health contract was finalized and our first quarterly bonus was distributed. My mother occasionally mentioned my work during family dinners, but always in passing, never with the enthusiasm that accompanied any news about Rebecca's latest career move. Speaking of Rebecca, her appearances at the practice during these years were infrequent, but always dramatic. After completing her MBA, she moved through various positions at consulting firms and tech startups, never staying longer than 2 years at any company. When she visited the clinic, she would arrive in expensive clothes, hug everyone enthusiastically, and make vague comments about the family business and healthcare innovation. During practice anniversary celebrations and community health fairs, she somehow positioned herself prominently in photographs despite having contributed nothing to our medical work. What bothered me most was how she would casually take credit for improvements and initiatives that had been entirely my work. "Oh yes, I suggested something like that to Dad years ago," she would say when community members complimented our new patient portal system, a system I had researched, implemented, and trained staff to use over 6 months of careful planning. "That's actually based on a case study from my business school," she claimed regarding our diabetes management program that I had developed through clinical research and pilot testing with actual patients. My resentment grew, but so did my dedication to our patients and staff. By my 7th year, Mitchell Family Practice had doubled its patient population, expanded to 12 full-time employees plus several part-time specialists, and established satellite locations in 2 neighboring towns. We had moved to a larger facility twice to accommodate our growth, and our clinical outcomes ranked in the top percentile for family practices throughout New England. My role had evolved to effectively running all clinical operations while my father maintained final authority on major business decisions, and my mother managed community relationships and marketing. They had begun discussing retirement, mentioning it occasionally during family dinners, but never making concrete plans. Then suddenly, Rebecca began showing unusual interest in the practice. After years of barely acknowledging its existence except to drop references to my family's medical practice at cocktail parties, she started calling my parents daily about healthcare industry trends. She arranged lunch meetings with my father to discuss the future of family medicine. She even began appearing at medical conferences and community health events, taking notes and asking superficial questions that revealed her complete lack of medical knowledge. I sensed something shifting, but I was too busy managing our most challenging period to date, a state health department review of our quality metrics and a complex transition to new insurance requirements that demanded significant documentation and process changes. I should have paid closer attention to the warning signs that were flashing around me. The announcement came during a family dinner at my parents' house on a Sunday evening in late September. Mom had prepared her famous roast chicken, Dad had opened a bottle of wine he'd been saving, and Rebecca had driven up from Boston specifically for this meal. The atmosphere felt celebratory, though no one had mentioned any special occasion. Between the main course and dessert, my father tapped his wine glass and stood up. "Your mother and I have made an important decision," he began, smiling at both of us, but focusing primarily on Rebecca. "After 32 remarkable years in medicine, we've decided it's time to step back from active management of Mitchell Family Practice." This wasn't entirely surprising. They were both approaching 70, and Dad had been dealing with arthritis that made long patient days increasingly difficult. What came next, however, felt like a physical assault on everything I believed about fairness and merit. "We're pleased to announce that Rebecca will be taking over as practice administrator and chief executive, effective next month." The dining room seemed to tilt around me as my father continued explaining their reasoning. Rebecca beamed, while my mother nodded enthusiastically beside her. The words washed over me like static, something about fresh business perspective and healthcare industry innovation and leadership experience from the corporate world. Rebecca couldn't distinguish between a stethoscope and a blood pressure cuff. She had never managed healthcare staff, dealt with insurance companies, or faced the life and death responsibilities that came with patient care. Yet here she was, accepting leadership of the practice I had essentially been running for years, while actually learning medicine from the ground up. When my father finished speaking, Rebecca gave a polished presentation about transforming family medicine for the 21st century and leveraging synergies between healthcare delivery and business innovation. She spoke in MBA buzzwords about concepts that demonstrated her fundamental misunderstanding of how medical practices actually operated. When everyone looked at me expectantly, I managed to offer congratulations that sounded hollow even to my own ears. After dessert, which I couldn't taste, I asked my parents to speak privately. In my father's study, I finally allowed my true feelings to surface. Dad, Mom, how could you make this decision? I've dedicated my entire career to building this practice. I know every patient, every staff member, every insurance contract. Rebecca has zero healthcare experience. My mother reached across to pat my hand condescendingly. Sweetheart, Rebecca has an MBA from Wharton. She has the business training needed to manage a growing healthcare organization in today's complex environment. My father nodded in agreement. Besides, Sarah, you'll still have your medical practice. Rebecca will need your clinical expertise during the transition period. My medical practice? I repeated, incredulous. Dad, I've been managing this entire operation for years while you've been gradually reducing your patient load. Everyone knows it, including our staff and patients. A flicker of acknowledgement crossed his face before he dismissed it. That's an exaggeration. Yes, you've taken on more clinical responsibility, but the business decisions have always been mine. This was demonstrably false. For the past 3 years, he had essentially rubber-stamped my decisions while spending increasing amounts of time on the golf course and at medical conferences that were more vacation than education. My mother interrupted with what she clearly thought was the complete explanation. Sarah, the truth is that Rebecca needs this opportunity. Her last position didn't work out as planned, and this gives her a chance to really establish herself in a successful enterprise. And there it was, the familiar pattern of our entire lives. Rebecca's needs always took precedence, regardless of merit, effort, or qualifications. I had spent 8 years building something extraordinary, and it was being handed to my sister because she needed career rehabilitation. I spent that night alternating between fury and devastation, seriously considering immediate resignation. I updated my resume and researched opportunities with other medical groups, imagining the satisfaction of walking away from a family that had never valued my contributions. But when morning came, I thought about our patients, diabetics whose condition I managed personally, elderly patients who trusted me with their complex health issues, families who had been coming to us for years. I thought about Lisa, Jennifer, Marcus, and our other staff members whose livelihoods depended on the practice's stability. I couldn't abandon them to Rebecca's inexperienced leadership. So I made the decision to stay and ensure a smooth transition, at least until I could make arrangements that protected our patients and staff. The following month became an exercise in professional torture. I created comprehensive documentation of all clinical protocols, patient management systems, and operational procedures. I arranged meetings between Rebecca and key insurance representatives, pharmaceutical liaisons, and medical equipment suppliers. I developed a detailed transition plan that would have been appropriate for someone with healthcare experience, though I doubted Rebecca would follow it. Throughout this process, Rebecca's behavior confirmed my worst fears. During meetings about clinical quality metrics, she checked her phone while I explained life-critical protocols for managing heart disease and diabetes. She rescheduled important meetings with insurance representatives for yoga classes and social events. She dismissed decades of medical knowledge with comments like, "That's old-school thinking. Business principles are universal. It doesn't matter if you're selling widgets or healthcare." Most alarmingly, she began having private meetings with representatives from MedCorp Solutions, a large healthcare management company known for acquiring family practices and converting them into impersonal, profit-driven clinics. When I questioned these meetings, she claimed they were informational conversations about industry best practices. The night before the official transition, I stayed late at the clinic, backing up patient records and making copies of critical operational documents. It felt paranoid, but something in my gut told me to protect information that might become important later. I also sent personal messages to several key patients, assuring them of my continued commitment to their care and providing my personal contact information in case they ever needed urgent medical consultation. The morning of Rebecca's first day as practice administrator began with a staff meeting in our largest conference room. Every employee attended: doctors, nurses, medical assistants, and administrative staff. Rebecca arrived 15 minutes late, dressed in a business suit more appropriate for a corporate boardroom than a medical facility. "Thank you all for coming," she began with a practiced smile. "Today marks the beginning of an exciting transformation for Mitchell Family Practice. I know many of you have been here for years, and I want you to know that I respect the foundation that's been built." She paused dramatically. "But respect for the past doesn't mean we can't innovate. My vision for Mitchell Family Practice involves significant modernization, strategic partnerships, and aggressive growth through expanded service offerings." For the next hour, she outlined plans that sounded impressive to someone unfamiliar with healthcare, but revealed her fundamental misunderstanding of medical practice management. She spoke about revenue optimization and market penetration, while proposing changes that anyone with clinical experience would recognize as dangerous to patient care and staff morale. Throughout her presentation, she occasionally glanced at me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. Not once did she acknowledge my role in the practice's current success or thank me for the comprehensive transition documentation I had provided. After the meeting, several staff members approached me with concerned expressions, but I maintained professional composure, assuring them that change always requires adjustment periods. The morning proceeded with scheduled patient appointments and routine clinical duties. Rebecca remained in her new office, previously my father's, with the door closed, presumably reviewing documents and taking calls. At 2:17 p.m., I received an email from her assistant, a new hire I had never met, requesting my presence in the administrator's office at 3 p.m. sharp. When I arrived, Rebecca was seated behind the large desk, a leather portfolio open before her. She didn't invite me to sit. "Sarah, I'll be direct because I respect your time," she began, though her tone conveyed no respect whatsoever. "I've spent the transition period evaluating our organizational structure and staffing needs going forward. After careful analysis, I've determined that your current role creates redundancy in our new operational model." I stood completely still, processing her words. "Redundancy?" I repeated. "I'm the primary care physician for over 800 patients. I manage the most complex cases in this practice." Rebecca smiled coldly. "Yes, and you've documented all of that beautifully during the transition. Thank you for that. But moving forward, we need physicians who can adapt to new healthcare delivery models, not someone attached to outdated approaches." She slid a folder across the desk. "Here's your severance package, 3 months' salary and benefits continuation, which is generous considering the circumstances." "What circumstances?" I asked, not touching the folder. She sighed as if I were being deliberately difficult. "Sarah, let's be adults here. We both know you don't support my vision for modernizing this practice. Your presence would undermine my leadership and create unnecessary friction among the staff." The casualness with which she was dismantling 8 years of my professional life, thousands of patient encounters, countless hours of continuing education, years of building relationships and clinical expertise, struck me with such force that I had to grip the back of the chair to steady myself. "Do Mom and Dad know about this decision?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. Something flickered across her face. Satisfaction, perhaps. "They've entrusted me with complete administrative authority, which includes all personnel decisions. Security will escort you to your office to collect personal items, and HR has prepared the necessary paperwork." Within 20 minutes, I found myself walking through the clinic I helped build, past shocked colleagues and confused patients, with a security guard, ironically, someone I had treated for hypertension just last month, trailing behind me like I was a criminal. Lisa stood in the doorway of the nursing station, her hand covering her mouth in disbelief. Marcus emerged from the administrative office, his face darkening with anger as he assessed the situation. Jennifer stepped forward as if to intervene, but I subtly shook my head. This wasn't the time or place for confrontation. I collected my few truly personal items: a photo of our medical team after receiving a state quality award, a stethoscope that had been my graduation gift from medical school, and a small plant that had sat on my desk for 3 years. My medical books, patient notes, and research materials remained behind. They were technically practice property. As I walked toward the exit, patients in the waiting room looked up from their magazines with confusion and concern. Mrs. Henderson, an elderly diabetic whose care I had managed for 5 years, started to approach me, but stopped when she saw the security guard. The elevator ride to the parking garage felt endless. The security guard, Tom, whom I had treated for a work-related injury the previous year, muttered an apology as we reached my car. "This isn't right, Dr. Mitchell. Everyone knows what you've done for this place." I thanked him quietly and placed my small box of belongings in my trunk. As I drove away from the medical building where I had spent the most meaningful years of my career, the emotions I had been suppressing finally erupted. I had to pull over in a shopping center parking lot as tears blurred my vision completely. My phone buzzed continuously with text messages from colleagues, expressions of shock, outrage, support, and questions about what had happened. I couldn't bring myself to respond yet. The drive home became a blur of tears and disbelief. I sat in my driveway for nearly an hour, unable to face the emptiness of my house, reliving the humiliation and betrayal. When I finally went inside, I collapsed on my couch and cried until my chest ached and my throat was raw. I cried for the patients I would no longer be able to help, for the medical career that had been my calling since childhood, for the years of work and dedication that had been discarded so casually. But mostly, I cried for the final, devastating confirmation that in my family, merit would never matter as much as favoritism. When the tears finally stopped, I found myself staring at the ceiling of my living room as afternoon light faded to evening. Something profound shifted within me during those quiet hours alone. The devastation gradually transformed into something sharper and more focused, a cold, clear determination. Rebecca had made a catastrophic error, one born of arrogance and ignorance. She thought she had won by taking control of the practice and eliminating me. She believed that with my departure, she had secured her position and removed any obstacle to her plans. But she had overlooked something crucial. No one understood Mitchell family practice, its strengths, vulnerabilities, relationships, and operational complexities, better than I did. And she had just freed me from any obligation to protect an organization that had so callously discarded me. That night, as I showered away the tears and ordered takeout I couldn't taste, a plan began forming in my mind. "This isn't over," I whispered to my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Not by a long shot. The week following my termination became a carefully orchestrated campaign of strategic action. I allowed myself exactly 24 hours to process the emotional aftermath. Then I packed those feelings away and approached my situation like the most critical diagnosis I'd ever made. First, I transformed my home office into a research center. I installed a large whiteboard where I mapped out the practice's structure, ongoing patient cases, and key relationships. On another wall, I created a timeline of actions and strategic targets. My dining table disappeared beneath stacks of medical journals, insurance documents, and healthcare regulations. The severance agreement Rebecca had offered remained and signed on my kitchen counter. My initial strategic advantage came from an unexpected source: my medical licenses and board certifications. Unlike Rebecca, I was credentialed to practice medicine independently, and my malpractice insurance was portable. More importantly, I had maintained personal relationships with most of our major insurance providers, relationships built through years of clinical excellence and quality metrics. On day 3, I received a call from Lisa, who spoke in hushed tones from her car during lunch break. "Sarah, things are falling apart here. Rebecca announced that we're transitioning to a streamlined care model that eliminates most preventive services and reduces appointment times to 15 minutes maximum." This confirmed my suspicions. Rebecca wasn't planning to improve the practice. She was preparing to strip it for parts and sell it to MedCorp Solutions. This streamlined model was exactly the approach that corporate healthcare companies use to maximize profits while minimizing actual patient care. Lisa continued providing crucial information. Rebecca had already alienated 3 major patients by dismissing their concerns and referring them to specialists unnecessarily. She had questioned the necessity of our diabetes management program, a program that had improved patient outcomes by 40% and earned recognition from the State Medical Association. She had also brought in efficiency consultants who knew nothing about medicine but had strong opinions about optimizing throughput. My next move involved a discreet consultation with Elizabeth Warner, a healthcare attorney who had helped us navigate complex insurance regulations in the past. Though technically representing the practice, Elizabeth had known me since medical school and had always respected my clinical judgment. What Rebecca did was ethically questionable and potentially legally problematic, she confirmed after hearing my story. Terminating a physician without proper board review and patient transition planning could violate state medical regulations. And if she's planning to sell to MedCorp as you suspect, she's required to notify all affected physicians 60 days in advance. Elizabeth also helped me understand another crucial point. The non-compete clause in my original employment contract had a significant loophole. It only applied if I was terminated for cause. Since Rebecca had fired me for redundancy, without documenting any performance issues, the non-compete was likely unenforceable. Through careful networking, I learned something else important. Rebecca was indeed drowning in debt. Her glamorous Boston lifestyle had been financed through credit cards and personal loans. Her previous position had ended when her company discovered she had been padding expense reports. Taking control of Mitchell family practice wasn't about family legacy. It was a desperate attempt to solve her financial crisis. Meanwhile, I methodically reached out to key patients with complex medical conditions that I had been managing personally. I was extremely careful to maintain ethical boundaries, never disparaging Rebecca or the practice. Instead, I simply informed them that I was no longer with Mitchell Family Practice, but would be available for consultation if they needed continuity of care during their transition to new providers. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Mrs. Henderson, the diabetic patient I had mentioned earlier, called me in tears. "Dr. Mitchell, they told me I need to see a specialist in Burlington for my diabetes, but you've been managing it perfectly for 5 years. I don't understand what's happening." Similar calls came from dozens of patients, heart disease patients whose medications I had carefully adjusted, elderly patients with multiple conditions who trusted my coordinated approach, families whose children I had cared for since birth. They were confused, concerned, and in many cases, afraid of losing the medical relationship that had become central to their healthcare. My most important strategic meeting happened 10 days after my termination. Lisa, Jennifer, and Marcus met me at a restaurant in the next town to avoid being seen by practice staff. They brought alarming news. Rebecca had already signed a preliminary agreement with MedCorp to sell the practice within 6 months. She had terminated our partnerships with 2 specialist groups, claiming they were unnecessary overhead. Most disturbingly, she had begun pressuring physicians to increase patient volume by reducing appointment times and eliminating non-essential services like preventive care and chronic disease management. "The practice will be destroyed within months if this continues," Jennifer said gravely. "Everything we've built in terms of patient relationships and clinical quality is being dismantled." Marcus slid a flash drive across the table. "These are copies of the MedCorp negotiations and financial projections she's been hiding from your parents. I could lose my job for this, but what she's doing isn't just wrong, it's dangerous to patient care." I thanked them for taking such enormous risks. "I have a plan," I assured them. "But I need you to document everything that happens over the next few weeks. Patient complaints, staff concerns, any safety issues that arise." That night, I reviewed the documents Marcus had provided. They confirmed every fear I'd had about Rebecca's intentions. The flash drive also contained emails between Rebecca and MedCorp executives that clearly showed they had been planning this acquisition since before my parents' retirement announcement. With my strategy crystallizing, I established my own family medicine practice, carefully choosing a location that was outside any reasonable interpretation of a non-compete zone, but accessible to patients who might want to continue their care with me. I obtained all necessary licenses and insurance contracts, working 18-hour days to establish the legal and operational framework for independent practice. By the end of 2 weeks, I had created something Rebecca couldn't touch, a legitimate alternative for patients who valued continuity of care and personalized medicine over corporate efficiency models. As I finalized my preparations that Friday evening, I felt the same focused calm I experienced before performing complex medical procedures. Rebecca had fired me thinking she was eliminating competition. Instead, she had freed me to become her most formidable rival, one with deeper medical knowledge, stronger patient relationships, and nothing left to lose. I launched my counter-strategy exactly 3 weeks after my termination, beginning with a carefully crafted letter to the state medical board documenting concerns about potential disruptions to patient care continuity and questioning whether the practice's new management had adequate medical oversight for the clinical decisions being made. The letter was factual, professional, and devastating. I outlined specific instances where administrative decisions were being made without appropriate medical input, potentially compromising patient safety. I noted the elimination of preventive care programs that had demonstrable health benefits. I documented the pressure being placed on physicians to reduce appointment times below accepted standards of care. The medical board's response was swift and serious. They announced a comprehensive review of Mitchell Family Practice's operations, clinical protocols, and management structure. This review would examine whether recent changes to practice operations met state requirements for physician oversight and patient care standards. The announcement sent shockwaves through the local medical community. Within 48 hours, I received calls from colleagues, insurance representatives, and patient advocacy groups offering support and expressing concern about the situation. My second strategic move involved my relationships with major insurance providers. Over years of clinical practice, I had built strong connections with medical directors at all 3 major insurers in our region. These relationships were based on consistently high-quality metrics, low complication rates, and effective cost management. When I informed them that I was establishing an independent practice, their response was enthusiastically supportive. "We've been hoping you'd consider independent practice," said Dr. Amanda Foster, medical director at Granite Health Insurance. "Your patient outcomes have been exceptional, and frankly, we've been concerned about some of the changes we're hearing about at Mitchell Family Practice." Within a week, all 3 major insurers had approved me as a preferred provider, with patient panels that would transfer seamlessly from my previous practice. This gave me immediate credibility and financial viability for my new practice. The third element of my strategy was the most personally satisfying. Remember those patients who had called me in distress about losing their medical care? I was now legally able to offer them continuity through my new practice. The response was overwhelming. Within 2 weeks, over 300 patients had requested to transfer their care to my new practice. These weren't random patients. They were the individuals with complex medical conditions who valued the personalized, comprehensive care that I provided and that Rebecca was systematically eliminating. Mrs. Henderson was among the first to transfer. "Dr. Mitchell, I've been coming to your family's practice for 20 years, but I'm not staying if you're not there," she said firmly. "You're the one who actually knows my medical history and listens to my concerns." Similar sentiments came from dozens of other long-term patients. The irony was perfect. Rebecca had fired me to eliminate an obstacle to her plans, but in doing so, she had enabled me to take the practice's most loyal patients and provide them with better care than they were receiving under her management. The cumulative impact of these 3 strategies created a crisis that Rebecca was completely unprepared to handle. Mitchell Family Practice was simultaneously facing regulatory scrutiny, insurance complications, and a mass exodus of patients to a competitor who happened to be the physician they had just fired. My phone rang at 8:23 p.m. on a Thursday, exactly 4 weeks after my termination. My father's name appeared on the screen, and I could hear the strain in his voice when I answered. "Sarah, what the hell is going on? We're getting calls about medical board investigations, insurance reviews, and patients leaving in droves. Rebecca says you're behind this somehow." I remained completely calm. "Dad, I haven't done anything improper. I've simply established my own practice and continued providing care to patients who requested it. Isn't that what any physician would do after being terminated?" Don't play games with me, he snapped. You know exactly what you're doing.
Dad.
Maybe we should discuss what Rebecca did first. Did she tell you she fired me with no warning, no discussion, and no transition plan for my 800 patients? Did she mention having me escorted out by security, like a criminal after 8 years of building your practice? His momentary silence told me she had not shared these details. She said you two agreed to part ways due to philosophical differences about practice management. He finally said, his voice less certain. That's a creative interpretation, I replied coolly. There was no agreement or discussion. She called me redundant and had me removed from the building. After 8 years of dedicating my life to building a practice that you then handed to someone with zero medical experience. My mother's voice suddenly joined the conversation. They were on speakerphone. Sarah, surely you're exaggerating. Rebecca would never. I interrupted her, my patience finally exhausted. Check your email, both of you. I've just sent you copies of the termination notice, the security escort request, and the severance offer. Also included are documents showing Rebecca's negotiations with MedCorp to sell the practice to a corporate chain. Negotiations that began months before your retirement announcement. The silence that followed was profound. When my father finally spoke, his voice was notably subdued. We didn't know, Sarah. Rebecca told us you had decided to leave to start your own practice. And you believed that without calling to ask me? The hurt I'd suppressed for weeks crept into my voice. After everything I contributed to Mitchell Family Practice, you didn't think it was worth a phone conversation to hear my perspective? More silence. Then my mother, sounding shaken. What do you want, Sarah? For the first time in my adult life, they had asked me what I wanted and seemed genuinely interested in the answer. I want you to understand what Rebecca has done to the practice and to me, I said firmly. I want you to look at the evidence objectively instead of automatically believing whatever she tells you. And I want you to consider whether you're really comfortable with her selling the practice you spent 30 years building to a corporate chain that will eliminate everything you believed in about patient care. I ended the call before they could respond, my heart racing but my resolve stronger than ever. The initial phase of my plan had succeeded beyond my expectations. In just 4 weeks, I had created enough pressure to force my parents to confront the truth about their golden child. But this was just the beginning. The real battle for the future of quality healthcare in our community and my own professional vindication was about to begin. 2 days after my phone call with my parents, I received an unexpected visitor. Rebecca appeared at my new practice during lunch break, her usual polished appearance replaced by obvious stress. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her designer suit looked hastily thrown together. We need to talk, she said, pushing past my receptionist into my office. I remained seated behind my desk, maintaining professional composure. I'm listening. You're destroying everything, she said, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. The medical board investigation, the insurance reviews, patients leaving, you're sabotaging the practice out of spite. I'm providing quality medical care to patients who requested it, I replied calmly. That's what physicians do. Rebecca's mask finally slipped completely. Don't act innocent. You know exactly what this is about. You've always resented me, always been jealous of everything I achieved. The irony was breathtaking. After a lifetime of watching my accomplishments be overshadowed by her mediocrity, she was accusing me of jealousy, while her own incompetence destroyed everything I had built. Rebecca, I earned my place in that practice through 8 years of medical school, residency, and building patient relationships. You were handed control of something you don't understand and immediately began dismantling it for profit. She started to argue, but I held up my hand. I have patients to see. If you want to discuss anything substantial, we can schedule a formal meeting through attorneys. The defeat in her eyes was unmistakable as she left my office. I felt no satisfaction, only the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you've chosen the right path. 6 weeks later, the state medical board released their findings. The report was damning. Significant concerns regarding medical oversight, patient care continuity, and administrative decisions made without appropriate clinical input. They mandated immediate corrective actions and placed the practice under enhanced supervision. The insurance reviews were equally devastating. All three major insurers expressed concerns about the practice's direction and began requiring additional documentation for patient care decisions. Granite Health Insurance suspended their preferred provider contract pending resolution of quality concerns. But the most telling evidence came from Marcus, who had been documenting everything as I requested. Patient complaints had increased by 340% in 6 weeks. 3 patients had been hospitalized due to medication errors that occurred when their complex care plans were simplified under Rebecca's streamlined model. The state's patient advocacy office had opened formal investigations into multiple incidents. My parents requested a meeting at their house on a Sunday afternoon, the same dining room where Rebecca had announced her takeover. This time, the atmosphere was somber rather than celebratory. "We've seen the medical board report," my father said quietly. "And we've reviewed the documents you sent us about the MedCorp negotiations." My mother looked older than I'd ever seen her. "Sarah, we owe you an apology that goes far beyond this situation with the practice." For the first time in my life, they acknowledged the pattern of favoritism that had shaped our family dynamics. They admitted they had been blinded by their desire to help Rebecca succeed, never recognizing that their support had come at the cost of dismissing my genuine achievements. "We made a terrible mistake," Dad continued. "We let our personal feelings cloud our judgment about what was best for the practice and the community we've served for 30 years. The conversation that followed was difficult but necessary. They explained that they had begun to see concerning signs in Rebecca's management style within days of her taking over, but they had rationalized these concerns rather than confronting them. They had wanted to believe that their decision was correct, even as evidence mounted that it was destroying everything they had worked to build. "What do you want us to do?" Mom asked, echoing her question from our phone call weeks earlier. This time, I was ready with a comprehensive answer. I proposed a solution that addressed everyone's needs while protecting the interests of patients and staff. Rebecca would step down from her administrative role, receiving a generous severance package that allowed her to maintain her dignity while addressing her financial problems. My parents would return to oversee a transition period while I gradually took over operational management of the practice. The key condition was that I would return as both a practicing physician and the medical director, with full authority over clinical operations and patient care protocols. The practice would remain independent, with no sale to MedCorp or any other corporate entity. Most importantly, all patients who had transferred to my practice would be welcomed back, and we would rebuild the comprehensive care programs that Rebecca had eliminated. The negotiation took 3 weeks, involving healthcare attorneys, insurance representatives, and medical board officials. Rebecca initially resisted, but the alternative, facing potential malpractice liability and professional sanctions, made the settlement attractive. Today, Mitchell Family Practice is thriving again. We've restored all the preventive care programs, rebuilt relationships with specialist partners, and implemented new quality initiatives that have earned recognition from state medical associations. The practice now employs 15 full-time staff members, including 2 nurse practitioners who work collaboratively with me on complex cases. Our patient satisfaction scores are the highest in the region, and we've been selected as a pilot site for an innovative rural healthcare delivery program. Rebecca used her severance to start a marketing consulting firm in Boston, working with clients who appreciate her business skills without requiring medical expertise. Our relationship remains cordial but distant. She attends family holidays but no longer makes claims about understanding healthcare. My parents remained involved in the practice for 6 months before truly retiring. Dad spent his final weeks teaching me the subtleties of practice ownership that go beyond clinical medicine. Mom helped reestablish our community relationships and patient outreach programs. Most importantly, they acknowledged something that had taken them decades to recognize. Merit should determine opportunity, regardless of family dynamics or personal favoritism. Standing in my office today, looking at the wall of thank you letters from patients whose lives were improved by our care, I realized that being fired was the best thing that ever happened to my career. It forced me to discover strengths I didn't know I possessed, and to fight for principles I might have compromised if I had remained in a comfortable but undervalued position. Rebecca's attempt to eliminate me as competition had the opposite effect. It created a more formidable opponent who understood the true value of patient care over profit maximization. Her arrogance and inexperience became the foundation of my strategic advantage. The betrayal by my family was devastating, but it ultimately led to genuine reconciliation based on honesty rather than the false harmony we had maintained for years. My parents now understand that supporting someone doesn't require diminishing someone else's accomplishments. As for Rebecca, she learned that business school credentials don't substitute for actual expertise, and that success built on favoritism rather than merit is ultimately unsustainable. The practice that bears our family name is now truly worthy of that legacy, not because it was handed down through favoritism, but because it was reclaimed through dedication, skill, and an unwavering commitment to patient care. Sometimes the best revenge is simply being undeniably better at what you do than the person who tried to replace you. And sometimes, when the dust settles, everyone involved is better off for having learned that lesson. Final note to my viewers: thank you for following this journey. If you've ever been underestimated or betrayed by people you trusted, remember that your worth isn't determined by their recognition. Build something so excellent that it speaks for itself, and let your success be the most eloquent response to those who doubted you. Don't forget to subscribe if this story resonated with you, and let me know in the comments how you've overcome similar challenges in your own life.